Ladies and germs, dogs and cats, children and babies, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast. I'm your marble mouth host, the Flonase champ, the Sudafed kid, Devin Morgan, Director of Baseball Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy. I'm joined, as per usual, by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy Assistant Director, Driveline Academy International Man of Mystery, most eligible bachelor in the state of Washington, Jeremy Tectiel. Housekeeping, let's jump straight into it. Axbat.com, code DL20 in the form of, I don't know, D as in dog, L as in leg. Dog leg 20.
I haven't used that one yet.
Yeah, you get a feeling for how imaginative my capacity is on this particular Monday at 1:42 in the PM. Dog as in D as in dog, L as in leg 20 at axbat.com will get you 20% off. Standard disclaimer here, it is the holidays. It's possible they may be running promotions where some of the stuff that you would have the coupon apply to wouldn't ordinarily apply to the coupon because they have better promotions going on. But notwithstanding, go buy some stuff at axbat.com. Use the code. It supports our scholarship fund. That's a good thing. What else do we have? We got the Skills to Scale book. It is out and on sale. We have Power Bats. We have Youth Underload Smash Bats. We have Power Hour hitting sessions that are live happening in the gym right now in all three locations. We have youth assessments that are running at all three locations and are running at a discounted rate from December 23rd through January 5th. Availability kind of determined in part by the holidays, but we still have some slots available there. And we have Driveline Academy Flex, where you can jump in and do the driveline from anywhere in the known universe, so long as they have, I don't know, air and gravity.
Gravity's an important one.
Yeah, core requirements. Okay. It's been a challenging week. It's been a challenging week, and I don't know how to do anything other than, like, talk about it. And I promise you, I promise, there is, like, a baseball-specific relevance of this story. So my Aunt Donna passed away. My Aunt Donna was actually my great-aunt because she was my mother's sister. They grew up in a sod house.
Grandmother's sister.
Yeah. They grew up, or my grandma grew up at one point in a sod house in Solon, North Dakota. It's a town of like, I don't know, it's like 200 people at most. And my Aunt Donna was the youngest of the three sisters and then two brothers. So my grandma Lori, her sister Pat, her sister Donna, and then my great uncles Cal and Jack. And they are like the foundation of that side of my mom's family. Beneath them were all like the uncles and aunts that I was effectively, raised by and raised around. And my Aunt Donna, though, was like very much everybody's like second mother. My Aunt Donna, when she was younger, had one son, my Uncle Dennis. I think I've probably talked about Dennis on the podcast before. Dennis was this bright-eyed, barrel-chested, crazy bearded behemoth of a man. When I knew him, when he was a kid, he played ball and he was good. Threw gas, had a banger curveball, and got overused in his high school career. Shout out to Queen Anne High School. And basically blew out his arm. And so he had to stop playing competitively, but like would continue to just like screw around with my uncles. And I have some very much, some core memories of my childhood watching my uncles play catch. And Dennis was the first one, he was the first person that I ever saw threw a ball that made noise. Like it's like the sound when it went through the air. And, he'd be out there, playing catch with, my Uncle Ben and my Uncle Greg, my Uncle Steve, my Uncle Tony, my Uncle Bruce, all of whom I looked up to as just titans. I mean, they were gods. And part of that has a lot to do, I'm sure, with the fact that my dad was not around as much as I might otherwise want. And by the time that like those memories are starting to substantiate, my stepfather was around and he's been there for me for as long as from the moment that he entered the picture to this very day. and certainly through a period of time when, as a young man who was struggling with like trying to reconcile the fact that like I didn't get what I wanted from my dad, and I took it out on my stepdad at a certain period of time. So anyways, my Aunt Donna, was like one of these three den mothers of this collection of, young savages, who then turned into, full-blown men. And Dennis struggled through no fault of anybody's lack of love and attention and effort. Like he struggled, he got into some stuff. And Dennis's problems were a struggle for like everybody, because that's how, my mom's side of the family, man, like that's how we operate, is we're there for each other. So that meant that, trying to be there for my Uncle Dennis meant, my parents lending him money and trying to give him a place to stay, and my grandparents lending him money and giving him a place to stay. Donna doing that with her husband, her second husband, Bob, doing that repeatedly to the point that, like, it's addict behavior, man. Like Dennis burned all the bridges. He burned all the bridges. And the last time that I saw my Uncle Dennis was in my mom could heat check me. It'd be either 1990 or 1991. And I had gone over to my grandparents' house to go get something for my grandparents. And I knew that Dennis was staying there at the time. And he was staying with my parents, or with my grandparents, because he just didn't, like, there was nowhere else to go. And the way that my grandparents' house used to be is like you'd walk down this little hallway, and at the end of the little hallway on the right-hand side was my grandparents' bedroom, and on the left there was another hallway that led into the kitchen. And if you took a left, there were stairs that went downstairs. You took a right, you went into the kitchen. And there was this little kick-in kind of hallway through the kitchen down to those downstairs steps. And I got to the front door of my grandparents' house. I went down that little hallway, took the left, and I saw my Uncle Dennis in passing, going from my right to my left through the kitchen down to the stairs to go downstairs where he was staying. And he kind of like turned and like looked at me through like one like half eye and just kept moving. And that's the last time I saw him, and when my Uncle Dennis passed, it was really hard on the family, and certainly incredibly hard on my Aunt Donna. And, for the remainder of her days, there was always like a little bit of sadness there, because it was her son. And like, I mean, it's the last thing you want to do, So, that tragedy notwithstanding, my Aunt Donna and my Uncle Bob carved out a beautiful life for themselves. Bob had kids of his own, so my Aunt Donna got a chance to be mom to these other kids who received her for the just excellent, warm-hearted human being that she was. And the thing I will say about my Aunt Donna is, like, she was also just like, she had an incredible mind. Like, when I was in high school later, so this is somewhere between 1992 and 1995, she gave me 2 books that a white woman who was born in Solon, North Dakota, had no business even owning. One of those books was all about the testing and development process of the atomic bomb. And it was literally called How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which is the subtitle to Stanley Kubrick's famous movie about that. And then the other book she gave me was Eldridge Cleaver's biography. Eldridge Cleaver, one of the founding members of the Black Panthers. And I'm like, and I was into that stuff. And I remember being downstairs in my Aunt Donna and Uncle Bob's place and like going through, they had a library, and finding those 2 books and being like, I'm so perplexed that these are things that you have, and also can I read them, I say all this to say that, like, my Aunt Donna had an incredibly special relationship with every kid in my family. And I know that like all of us were afforded opportunities to feel the type of specialness that I felt in the like these in these little moments with her. She passed away, and we had the memorial service this weekend, and quite frankly, I was kind of out of it for like a decent part of last week because I knew that we were going to go to church. We were going to do the memorial, and it's the church that my grandparents were like bedrocks of, and I kind of grew up in. It's a Lutheran church. They have like this big organ that's behind like the altars and whatnot. My grandpa built that. They did a remod in the 80s. My grandpa did that. My grandma used to run the ladies like the knitting club in the basement of that place, and my wife took both of my kids at different points to like go down there and like quilt with these old ladies. And I don't know, man. It's just like I grew up in that place, and even if sometimes like I really didn't want to, like I grew up in that place. And I knew that like going to church this last weekend meant going back to the place that I hadn't been since my grandmother passed away. And it was going to be a challenge, like it was going to be a challenge. And it's like, on the one hand, look, I'm more than happy to kind of tell myself that story that, that I'm glad that my Aunt Donna doesn't have to be alone anymore because, her husband's gone. Her son has been gone for a long time. She's with her sisters. Like, I'll tell myself that story, even if there's a part of me that might struggle to believe. I might be both A, selfish, and B, I don't know, man. I struggle to I don't know if I'm telling myself that just because I want to feel good about it, or if like that's really what it is.
What's the difference?
I don't know, and I don't know that it even matters.
Right.
I really don't know that it matters, and maybe that's just the thing that I actually need to get comfortable with. So, anyways, we have the memorial service, and for probably like 3/4 of it, I might have like slightly kidnapped my cousin Taylor's 6-month-old daughter and just like held her and like walked around because I couldn't just sit there. And my Uncle Steve goes up. My Uncle Steve went up and like did the memorial talk, and Steve did 2 things that I'm very angry about. One of those things was he was like, well, Donna was the last one. All our elders are gone. And he's like, but if that's true, then that means that I'm now the elder. And at that moment, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, well, now that turns for me too. Yeah. Because now if my mom and my dad and my uncles and my aunts are now the elders that as a child I looked up to my grandparents and my great aunts and uncles, then like I'm getting pulled that way too, regardless of whether I want to or not. Yeah. And then, my Uncle Steve also, stuck the knife in and twisted it, which is like the mark of a great memorial speech.
Sure.
Like you gotta make them feel the love, and you gotta make them feel the pain, and like you gotta get through all of it. And he actually used, so when Dennis was near the end, he had a dog, and he had a dog named Madison. And Dennis was at a point where he was no longer capable of caring for the dog. So the dog got shipped to my Uncle Steve and his wife Morgan, my Aunt Morgan. And Madison was a part of their lives for years and years and years after Dennis passed. But then, like all dogs do, like it's, they reach the end, and my Aunt Donna, every year on Dennis's birthday, would send like a card and flowers to my Uncle Steve and to my Aunt Morgan to give
for the dog, yeah.
for the dog, right? And send letters and whatnot. So then after Madison passed and my Aunt Donna was made aware of it, she sent another letter to one last letter to ostensibly to Morgan, right? But it's really for all of us, and literally was talking about how, this is just the process, and you got to kind of go through and give each other grace as you go through this process of like the grief, but also the love that like is left in the remainder, right? And then my Uncle Steve uses my Aunt Donna's letter during the memorial service, who's like, so now Donna is talking to us. And it's like, how dare you? Yeah. How dare you? I'm emotionally sensitive right now. I don't need all this. Anyways, we finish the service, and then we go out, and at the church there's what's called a columbarium. And the columbarium is where basically like cremated remains go. The reason that there's a columbarium at my grandparents' church is because my grandfather built it. As he was nearing the end of his life, he knew that was a thing that they wanted at their church. So he calls me, his idiot grandson, and I downloaded like some architectural software off the web, and like I'm futzing around with it and like sitting at my grandparents' condo with him like over my shoulder, and I'm like trying to design in 3D what this thing is going to look like in reality. So we went through this process and had like a decently informed design that we could then take to the council of the church and be like, hey, this is what we're going to do with it. We need the money, et cetera, and then go get the thing built. And there was an interval time between when we finished the design and then when he actually had to go present it to the church council, in which my grandpa ended up back at the hospital. And it was a significant hospital trip. Pastor got called, like they did like the last rites and everything, and I don't know how and I don't know why, but my grandfather came back out of it. So then, but then, he's got to go present this idea to the church council, and like truly what he's presenting is like, this is the place that when I die, which I know is inevitably going to happen and soon, yeah. I'm going to be there. And I want my wife to be there. And the pastor that he had before, that he had a really close relationship with, who had Lou Gehrig's disease, Doug Landkoltz, was going to be there. And one of their children who died post birth, but within the first like 6 months, David was all going to be buried there. And so I pick up my grandpa and we drive down to this church council meeting, and I'm like, man, I don't know how this is going to go. Just got out of the hospital. And some of the Parkinson stuff had started to settle in, and there was some dementia stuff that had settled in. And, it's a church council meeting, so you're sitting through like the minutia of the other stuff they need to talk about. We're going to talk about like the coffee budget and, all this other stuff, right? And then it's like, okay, boom, it's time for, it's time for Mr. Newton to present. And, we had our printed out pictures of like what the thing was going to look like. And he gets up in front of the church council and he just nails. He's just nails, like completely locked in, completely lucid, but not even just lucid. Like it's him. Gets approved. And then me and my dad and my brother spent, I don't know, at least one full weekend, if not several, moving pavers around and like getting this whole space designed. So like, we've got literal like sweat and a little bit of blood in the making of this thing. So we finish the memorial service and we go out to where the columbarium is. And then there's like a, I don't know, it's not like a stool. It's like a little bench. And on the bench, on the back of it, after my grandfather passed, they had this thing made, and it says, dedicated to Daniel Newton, planner, visionary, builder. And I haven't gone since my grandma passed away. And
So you never saw that?
No, I knew it was there because he passed away before my grandma did. So, but I've been avoiding it. I have been avoiding it, and I know that is cowardly to say, but it's just the truth, man. Like it's just the truth. And it doesn't mean I don't think about him every single day. It doesn't mean I don't think about my grandma every single day. I've just avoided going to like the physical place. But now I don't have a choice, right? Because now my Aunt Donna's here, and she's going to go, she's going to be laid to rest in the same structure that has my Aunt Donna, and my Uncle Bob and both of my grandparents and their son David, and like all these, again, like these elders of mine that are The dominoes have all fallen, man. They're all gone. Yeah. So we do the thing, and there's some of the stuff that, like, I know that I'm already getting way too personal on a podcast. It's ostensibly about youth baseball, but, like, I'm using a little bit of executive privilege to get this stuff off my chest. So we do go through that whole thing. I walk back inside, and I see this old guy there. And again, like, I haven't been a member, like an active participant in this church for at least 20 years, because that's how long that I've been married to my wife. And probably some amount of years before that, because prior to that, it was like, it's my mid-20s, and I wasn't the one who was like, kids, listen to your parents, but, like, I wasn't that guy who in the early 20s was like, I'm at church every Sunday. So anyways, I walk in, we're coming into, like, the little coffee social era where they're doing the post-game party. Sure. And I see this guy, and I'm like, it's that, like, that tickle in the back of your mind. It's like, man, I know you, but it's not really clicking why. And then my dad comes over. He's like, hey, do you remember this guy? Do you remember Paul? And I'm like, oh shit. Paul used to umpire my games, and I was a catcher. So Paul and I, when I played, he was always my ump. And we would sit back there and talk throughout the whole game, because he was one of those umpires. Yeah. He was one of the good ones, where he's going to build a relationship with the kid. And we would talk during the game. He'd be like, Devin, do you think I missed that one? Honestly, Paul, I think you might have missed that one. Because, look, man, it's youth baseball, and who cares? Anyways, so I end up having this conversation for, 45 minutes with a guy who literally was on the field when I played, and was there in a way that, like, I just never, I didn't think I would ever see that dude again. Yeah. And, for however many years, I mean, he caught a lot of games. So we ended up talking about it. I was like, Paul, how many years did you actually umpire? He was like, honestly, the core of it was just 8. It was like 8 years, and he did some intermittent stuff after that, but the majority of it was just like those 8 firm years. And I just happened to catch probably half of them. I would imagine he probably caught he probably umpired, and I caught all those games with him between the ages of, 11 to 15, maybe 11 to 16, depending on, I have to go back and look, but it puts a lot of this stuff in perspective, because, like, now, so he's like, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, Paul, I'm kind of in baseball still. And he's like, what? It's like, yeah, let me tell you about it. So, dear listener, I end up giving Paul the download about everything that we do here.
And we have a new listener on our podcast.
Yeah, I'm working on it. And, when we start talking about it, and I'm telling him about, like, hey, our big thing, it's really 2 things, right? It's skill development and engagement. It's skill development and engagement because we want kids to play the game longer. And, like, that's the hack, is you address the skill stuff to make sure that they're competitive, and you address the engagement to make sure that they love enough to want to do it. And so I'm talking about this to Paul, who hasn't actively umpired in quite some time, and only did it for the core of it, would have been somewhere between, let's say, 1986 to 1993, 94 maybe. And I'm telling him about, like, how youth baseball is now, and the problems we have to deal with, and, the things we talk about here on this pod. And he's like, he didn't get it. We're talking about coach behavior. He's like, well, yeah, you have those coaches who, they lit into these kids, and we just kick them out. I'm like, yeah, Paul, but you can't really kick them out now, right? No tournament organization is going to turn down these checks. Right. Parents aren't walking away and going like, well, I guess it's not worth my child being treated this way. That's often not the right. It's just like, well, it's sunk cost.
Toughen up.
Yeah. It's right. Either A, toughen up, or B, hey, we've got anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 to $5,000 committed to this thing. So walking away from that money is going to be a real challenge. Hey, it's sunk cost. Might as well just, like, let's just wear it. And there were a couple times he was like, yeah, but, like, you just gotta get rid of them. And I was like, there's no who. Yeah. Where's that oversight going to come from? Where is this top level training for how you're supposed to behave, oversight about whether you're compliant with those standards, consequences if you're not. Where does that exist? It doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I would posit that most of the time you have a coach like that, there probably isn't a better option.
Facts.
If there was, you probably wouldn't have a coach like that for long. Like if there was another parent on the team that was willing to do this, they wouldn't sit there and stand for that for long.
No, they absolutely would not. Would not. But bereft of options, hey, we're just going to deal with it. You know, we're just going to deal with it. And it was hard not to it's hard not to lament the decay of Little League as a community-based organization that had that capacity for oversight, because we've just walked away from that.
Yeah.
You know, like we've largely walked away from that. There's no... The community doesn't really exist. And at best, you're hoping that like the word gets out, and like, you know, the market economy dynamics of like, if the word gets out and somebody runs a bad program, they treat kids poorly, that enough people are going to find out that that guy's not going to get the word. But I can think of some of the programs that I'm aware of where they're coached by guys who have a multi-year and perhaps a decades-long reputation for treating kids poorly, and every year they get a new crop.
Yeah, what happened to my kid?
Yep.
Won't happen to my kid.
Yep. Yeah, every year. And it's like, blows me away, man. It blows me away, because when I'm talking to this guy who was on the field and again, is an umpire role, right? Where like you're going to be at the center of any scorn or any derision or whatever that might happen, any hurt feelings. His perspective on it was so simple. He's like, you just get rid of those guys. And I was like, Paul, like that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It really, really doesn't.
I umped for a very long time. The problem with that line of thinking is that most of the time, when you're umpiring a game and you're like, I really like the way this coach treats his players and whatnot, very rarely is that team winning games.
Yeah.
They're having fun, but like very rarely are they winning games. And when that's the point of it, people just don't gravitate to that guy. People make their own decisions of what's important for them, and if they don't care as much about the winning, they won't gravitate to that guy, or they would gravitate to that guy. But most people are going to have a hard time saying, like, I don't care about winning, I just want my kid to have fun, because that's like quote unquote loser mentality.
Yeah.
Whereas like a lot of times the really, and this is my experience umpiring for sure, and some of my experience in youth baseball, but like the worst of those coaches, their kid is probably the best player in the entire league.
Yes.
So it's like there's nothing you can really do, because kids are going to want to play with that kid because he's good. Everyone is taking some signal from like, well, the kid's good, so the method must work.
Yes.
Like if he's getting this out of his own kid, he must be able to get it out of my kid. And it's just like this cycle where like everyone kind of recognizes that this is not great.
Yeah.
But they're just like, well, I don't want to miss out. Like if that kid's going to get something out of this coach, even though like I'm sending him to a terrible human being, like if that kid, like I don't want my kid to miss out on like potentially getting better by this coach who's doing that.
Yep. I'm more than willing to be the 7th or 8th guy in the lineup on a team where LeBron James is on the roster. Right?
Sure. If in this example, and this is not a great example because LeBron's dad wasn't in the picture, but like if LeBron's dad was coaching the team and was a terrible human being.
Yeah.
And was just like, I'm never taking LeBron out. I'm going to put these kids in, this kid, his dad is helping sponsor the team, so he's 3'9", but he's my center.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing, like, sure. Like, and kids still want to be on that team because, especially once you get older, there's the exposure thought of like, well, that kid is going to, like, he's good enough that scouts are going to come see his games.
Yeah, they're coming here.
And they might see me.
Yep.
If they're coming to see that guy's games, they might see me.
Yeah. I was trying to think if there's a way I could twist that analogy to say something disparaging about Doc Rivers. I'm not sure. I don't know that I can land it.
In terms of Austin?
No, in terms of being a terrible basketball coach. I can't stand that guy. I have a lot of hurt feelings about what happens with Doc Rivers when he was coaching Tracy McGrady in like the early 2000s in the Magic.
Oh, so. We're like 4 teams ago. You're still like,
yeah.
there's a lot of
I'm never
anti-Doc
gonna let that
Rivers
go.
people from like Clippers fans to Sixers fans. You're taking it all the way back to the. I think the only team he's coached that like fans aren't upset at the Celtics, and like I bet they're Bostonians. They're upset about something. So I'm sure at this point that's all worn off.
Yeah, I mean
they've won another title now, so now they can go back to.
Yeah, you commit to running Hito Turkoglu at the 3, and I'm just never going to let that down. I just can't. Shout out to anybody that remembers Hito Turkoglu.
Hito Turkoglu, I believe, like high up in the Turkish administration.
Really?
Oh yeah.
As like their international basketball stuff.
Oh, it's like a
politician.
Yeah, like a
what?
Like he runs like some sports stuff for them, but he's definitely a like an and I please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I last I heard Hito Turkoglu was not a friend of democracy.
Good God. All right, look, guys. The only thing I can say here is that after 80 episodes, you've got to give us a little bit of a break to kind of just talk about whatever. This is going to be our pressure release valve. I don't know if we could talk about the Bears. We could talk about Yellowstone, although somehow I need to avoid spoiling myself because I have another 2 seasons to get caught up.
Yeah,
this is going to be the pressure release episode. Hito Turkoglu, good God. Who knew it would take us down this dark path? Hito Turkoglu is an enemy of democracy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he. The last I heard, he was not a friend of democracy, and I can't remember which NBA player it was. Oh, Enes Kanter.
Sure.
Who was Turkish. The two of them got it and got excommunicated from Turkey and to the point where he couldn't go to USA basketball competitions if it was on foreign soil, like in certain places. And I'm pretty sure Turkoglu was like, I'm going to arrest Enes Kanter. I'm pretty sure that was a thing.
What the hell? Yeah, it's president of the Turkish Basketball Federation. Yikes. Well, weirdly, I know like on the MMA side, there have been a lot of fighters who had like a weird quasi-friendly relationship with some dictator over on that side who's may or may not be up to like some very not good stuff. But like he's got a lot of money, so he'll fly them in and they'll do seminars and take pictures and it all looks hunky-dory. And then he's got like a internment camp on the backside of his presidential palace.
Most MMA fighters, not the guys I go to for political advice.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, just no.
Yeah.
No. It's fine. They have another skill set.
Yeah.
Their skill set isn't precluded to politics.
Yeah. No, all right, if we're letting off steam, I want to talk about these UFOs in New Jersey. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, tell me about it. What do I need to know?
I don't know. Apparently, it's been all over the place. I don't know. Now people are commenting on it. I don't know.
Well, they had congressional hearings about UFOs, and like some people were like, some stuff's actually happened, right?
Yeah, there's stuff out there.
Yeah.
I'm sure the truth is out there. We need the real X-Files back.
I mean, what does it say though about our society that like that's a thing, and we're kind of just like, all right, keep scrolling.
I think it says everything about society. Yeah.
Have you read the Facebook, the Little Red Book?
No.
So Facebook,
I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so Facebook has it's basically like a foundational document that instead of like a technical sense, it talks in terms of like culture and intention, what they're trying to do with Facebook.
Like an internal Facebook company?
Yeah. So they call it the Little Red Book. I got a copy of it in Slack. I'll send it to you. It's a really good read. And the first thing I thought when I read it was like, we need this for Academy. Like, I really did think that. Anyways, one of the things that they kind of talk about in the Little Red Book is kind of two parallel ideas, which is there's more people on this planet than there ever has been before. They're producing more content than they ever have before, but they have the same amount of time. Mm. So if you consider like the reality of that in terms of like the logistics of it, everyone is drinking from the fire hose. There's no way that we could possibly like stay in touch and stay on top of all these things simultaneously. And they kind of apply that idea as like the reason why Facebook exists. And if you think about, I would think about this more in like post social network era of Facebook, maybe not so much today, but I'm sure that they're still updating the doc, with like their intentions, right? They thought about Facebook, and I'm sure that there's still people at that company still think about it as like
a curator of news,
as in like a social connector, a social connector in a way that in that paradigm, right, where there's more people, more content in the same amount of time, what you want to do is you want to stay connected to the people that matter, right? The tricky thing is that like, I don't think anybody, well, maybe not anybody. I don't know that anybody's utilizing social networks, period, much less Facebook, that way anymore. Because if you bring it all the back to like the MySpace days, right? Like your friend count was like a badge of honor, right? You wanted to add more people. Yeah. Same thing on Facebook, right? Like my Facebook for personal stuff, like I don't really let anybody through the gate that I don't know in person. You want to follow me on Twitter or whatever, that's fine. But like my Facebook and my Instagram are like largely like it's mine. It's people that I know. Yeah. But on Twitter, I mean, I follow probably like 1,500 people, and I would imagine that of that, probably 2/3 of them I've never met in person.
Oh, way higher than 2/3.
I mean,
if you follow 1,500 people, you think 500 of those people you've met in person?
Maybe through ABCA and stuff like that, where it's just like, hey, shake your hand.
I guess that's fair, but
no, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, well, what's the
it seems
rule?
like we're right on the edge of this topic, and I'll just push us over.
Yes.
Of like, we have had to deal, and a massive sports fan such as myself, and a massive nerd such as myself has had to deal with people complaining about our inclusion in the sports spaces since we started. Analytics is ruining sports, whatever it is.
Oh, let's go, dude.
Every one of these sports.
Yes.
Has analytics ruined human interaction? And why don't we talk about that as opposed to analytics? Like, there are a lot of these people who are complaining that analytics has ruined every part of the sports that they watch, enjoy, and consume, yet they are happy to lean into the way that social media algorithms use analytics to change the way people interact, who people interact with, and the way they interact with them.
Go one level deeper, it changes the way people think. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's literally changing the way people think. Like we are gaming thoughts about choices made within a society and what's correct or not, what suits us or not, with like what gets the most attention.
Yes. So
Right?
I was bored. Was it early Sunday morning before football, and I turned on Amazon Prime. I don't remember why, but I turned on Prime, and it popped up. I'm a big, if you couldn't tell this by just looking at me or listening to me, big fan of Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Who isn't?
Who isn't? And apparently JB Smoove has a new
special
game show.
Oh, okay.
And I just will watch anything he does.
Yeah.
And so I turned on the first episode, and I can't remember what it's called. Maybe it's like Buy It or Buy It Now or Buy It Now Store or something along those lines. But it's a game show funded by Amazon. Like it's an Amazon Prime game show of people basically like Shark Tanking. They go in front of a group of 100 like 100 normal people. They give a 90-second pitch of their product.
Buy it now.
Buy it now, okay.
Yeah.
And they have to get only 10 out of the 100 people to agree that this is a product they would buy. To get 10% of the population, the bar has to be so low.
Yeah.
Like even the products that so once they have at least 10, then they go to this like panel, and the panel decides, including like the VP of marketing for Amazon, if this is like going to go in the Amazon store.
Okay.
And she's basically like, it needs 2 out of the 3 votes to get into the store.
Yeah.
And I've never watched like American Idol or those, but I always feel like it's like one of the judges is on there specifically to be negative and like to X people.
Yeah. Somebody. Well,
and then one is good, and then there's like the actual judge on there who's like the swing vote.
Yeah.
But like one of them is always going to vote yes, and one of them is always going to vote no. So that's kind of what this is in the marketing ladies, like the swing vote.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, this is just like I'm going to get the customers to answer these questions for me. Like
Sure.
this is the easiest form of product testing.
Yeah.
And like people might actually watch this show while we're doing product testing. And like it was so obvious that if we can get 10 out of 100 people to agree this is worth purchasing, we can run this through Amazon marketing and probably get like 90 out of 100 people to buy this.
Sure.
With like the way we think and the way our algorithm is going to push this to the right type of people. And it's just like, yeah. I mean, like this is like retail consumerism, social interaction. Like it's not just sports that analytics has massively impacted and changed the way we view things and interact with sports over the last 20 years. And like, didn't expect that from this podcast today, huh?
And the toothpaste isn't going back in the tube.
No.
Like So what it's ChatGPT,
And it's tied together, right? Like
Yes.
this old ump that you're talking to,
Paul.
Sorry, Paul. Nah, he's not listening to this. He's like, I don't really understand. Like this, it used to be like this. Now it's very, very different.
Yeah.
And like that toothpaste isn't going back in the tube either.
Yeah.
Because the way people interact with each other has just kind of fundamentally changed.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we did end up talking a little bit about the evolution of the game, and I wouldn't say with any great amount of confidence that Paul was like a big analytics guy.
Sure.
I think it's very much the opposite.
Yeah.
And some of that is just relative to age and perspective and things that you're comfortable with, etc. But the one thing that he said a couple times, he's like, played 17 inches across. Played 17 inches across. And, he said to me, he was like, look, does little Johnny or little Katie, when they don't throw a strike, do they get a pat? Do we widen the strike zone for them? No, it's 17 inches for a reason. And therein is the opportunity, but also the conflict. Because when kids don't perform the task, the outcome is graded in a binary fashion, strike or not strike. And look, and actually, now we are going to backdoor our way into Thomas Bentley's Driveline intern about an R&D guy had a great post that landed on socials about the two things that are biggest correlations to throw ball velocity, which is how fast, like you just have to move fast. And we can break it down into the way that you move your center of gravity down the mound and rotational velocity. And that's just it. Right? Like those are the metrics that you need to be able to get good at in order to perform this skill at a high level. And it's a different skill than the one that I think is commonly taught. Therein lies the rub. Because with kids, and this is the thing I posted this morning, it's not that, kids at a physiological level, children are not small adults. I've said that a bazillion times. I'll say it one more.
You'll say it a lot more than one.
A lot more than that. And because of that, there's this concept in training about the speed and accuracy trade-off, right? The Sato principle. Mm-hmm. And the thought being, very succinctly, that the further that you increase the rate of speed of movement, the greater sacrifices for accuracy that you're going to make towards in the execution of that movement, right? And the joke that I made is just like children's whole lives are a speed accuracy trade-off, right? Because they're kids, right? Yeah, their coordination systems are not developed. Their brains are getting rewired every 6 to 12 weeks because of rapid rates of physiological growth. They're going to have to make that accommodation, but that doesn't mean that there is not any gold in the hill of helping them learn how to move fast. Mm-hmm. At a specific rate of quality. And if you do that, you're going to get two benefits out of that. As you raise the ceiling, you're raising the floor with it. So the reason that if you, whatever level of performance or competition you're at right now, whatever age, the best performer in that group is largely the kid that is the best at moving fast.
Yes.
And because of that, that guy's or that girl's 80% is better than your 100% because they've learned how to apply their 80. And your 100 is zooed all over the place. But that doesn't mean that training to move at 100% is bad. It means you have to get good at it.
Right.
It means it's a skill.
Right.
So to Paul's point, yeah, if the plate is 17 inches across and you throw a ball, no one's really looking to let's change the confines of the game. In that specific regard, it's contingent upon coaches and parents being able to provide context. And if you can provide that context in training and go, hey, let's continue to get better at that. If you want a more baseball-specific podcast than the one we're delivering for you today, you can listen to last week's episode all about intended zones and command tracking and being able to do literally this thing that we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. How do you run bullpens that encourage kids to do both? Pair intent with accuracy. Right. It's a thing that you can literally do.
Yeah.
I mean, so I told you last night we had it, and then my weekend was a mess. Yesterday, I spent 6 some odd hours in the car, had to drive down to see my niece perform in her Nutcracker play. McKinley did an amazing job. Came back up here, and by the time that we were coming back up, it was 7:30. It's I can't have him throw a B-day in our backyard or in the street and try to catch him because I'm going to lose an eye, and I don't want to do that. So we ended up
And
stopping.
I might be best case scenario in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Best case scenario. I mean, like there's teeth are coming out. Like I don't want that smoke. So we ended up stopping here and just had him just throw. He goes through and it was like a recovery day plus. And so he's going to go through his recovery day stuff. And then he's just going to work on some pitches to get some volume. He was like, Dad, can you come watch and like help me like work through these, like they're at bats? And dude, it's my favorite thing that we do. It's my favorite thing that we do. Cause we'll just be like, okay, it's 0-0 first batter. What do you want to do? And I was like, all right, well, let's think about this. Let's try to get out of here as soon as we can and try to keep the pitch count low. So let's throw good competitive pitches. So, hey, we're going to go, middle in turbo sinker to start. And I was like, let's go slider pitch 2. He's like, well, I want to hold this. I want to hold the slider back for a bit. I was like, okay, all right. I like how you're thinking about that. Let's throw the cutter then. Okay, so we're going to go slider this way, cutter that way. Okay, well, what do you want to do to finish? He's like, I think curveball to finish. I was like, okay, cool. Curveball down and away. Make sure it's buried, right? Make sure it's buried. Don't miss middle. Or obviously you don't want to coach the negative, right? So I act like I just deleted that because I didn't say that. So we ended up going through this process of I can't remember the volume that he had, I think 40 pitches or whatever. So we got through 6 batters. And he's throwing, and we're having this constant back and forth conversation about what he wants to throw, what we're setting up for the next pitch, like how do we sequence this stuff together? And I'm really kind of just like, he thinks that I'm telling him what to do. I am very much just like letting him drive. Like, well, okay, if by the time we got to imaginary batter number 4, I was like, okay, well, hey, it's their number 4 hitter, probably the best guy in their lineup. You think now is the time that you want to start to use that slider? He's like, yeah, for sure. It's like, okay, cool. So how are we going to set it up? So, well, I've shown the turbo sinker before, down and in. Let's think maybe four-seamer up and in. Four-seamer up and in, and then bury it in, and then slider away. Like, and it's a conversation.
Yeah.
It's a conversation, and it's all about, and there are a couple times in the bullpen where like, it's like in a video game, like I'll give him like a rewind. Hey, we went, we were supposed to go, sinker, just let it play middle away or middle in, and then it just ends up like dead center.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's rewind that pitch, right? Let's re-get in that situation. Point being, there's all these opportunities that you can use analytics, you can use data, whether that's a chart, whether that's velocity, whether we were actually throwing on a TrackMan that we weren't. A pen and paper to provide context. And like, that's the thing to me about analytics is like, maybe it has wrecked some aspects of human interaction. Like I don't know how we walk back off that cliff edge. But I also don't think it's ruined sports.
No. And I think you would, you might get fired if you did,
Yeah.
But I think it's ruined sports in so much as it has created a fake but also real barrier between jocks and nerds.
Sure.
People who are athletes and people who don't have the athletic ability but understand the sport on a different level. And like that's always been a thing. There's always been friction between those two people.
Yeah.
Those two parties. And like, I feel like what we've seen a lot of over the last 20 years is like one of those parties feeling like they're losing control. When really it's the other party learning the game on a different level.
Does that conflict exist in golf? Do you know?
Oh, for sure. Bryson DeChambeau is hated.
So can we look to golf as just like the direction that we want to go? Because it seems like on
But no, it exists in golf.
No,
Like,
I know. But what I'm saying is that like it seems like on the broadcasts for golf, things like club speed, things like face angle.
Okay,
or
so
whatever,
we're right back to broadcasters.
100% we are, because in their
correct.
broadcast,
Yeah.
they're not crapping on that information. They're weaponizing it. And it's like they're bringing people in the way that they communicate it. And in baseball, we have the exact opposite. Largely.
Correct.
Well, maybe not largely. By people that have a ton of leverage in the communication space in baseball actively poo-poo that stuff.
Correct. I mean, I don't hand up. I watch a lot of golf highlights. I don't sit. If I sit and watch golf, I'm asleep in 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I don't watch a lot of golf broadcasts. I don't know how they bring it up, but like I imagine it's like, oh, he sliced that one extremely,
Right.
was what they would say 25 years ago, and now they're putting like a metric on that.
Yep.
Of like how many degrees did he slice it by or whatever it was there. You know, scouts have been talking about velocity for literally ever. They've been talking about spin forever.
Yeah.
Velocity they called speed. Spin they called carry.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's
Got a lot of ride.
right. They're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just putting a number on it. So like what it actually should have done if it was done properly initially, what it should have made most of the scouts and the scouting world feel pretty good about themselves.
Yeah.
Because like
they were right.
They were right. The stuff that they saw with their eyes is now being validated by technology and like higher level technology of like, oh yeah, this guy did have more ride. You were right. Now, why you're right is a way we can use the analytics.
Yes.
And like how to create more pictures of that type is a way we can use the analytics. But like we should have used the same jargon.
Yeah.
You should have used the same lingo. And I think that was a large part of where it got lost was like,
We brought in the new words.
yeah, calling it something different, putting a different name on it makes people feel like they're losing control on whatever they used to have. Because like you can read old scouting reports. It was all analytics.
Yeah.
They just were saying it without actually putting a specific quantifiable number on the metrics.
Yep.
But they were talking about metrics. You know, they talked about bat speed. They talked about exit velocity.
Yep.
They just didn't say like he swings at 65 or he hits at 105. Like it's the same thing, just with a slight difference, and like that made all the difference in the world. Just like the lingo used around it.
Yep.
And like it drove a barrier that I do think we are mostly beyond at this point, except for a handful of broadcasters and retired MLB players that just refuse to let this go. Yeah. But like I think like by and large in actual baseball teams, unless you're a team that I don't know is maybe owned by someone who responds to emails, you can look at social media to know which team I'm talking about. But like most teams, have gotten past that point.
Yeah.
And like the best organizations, I used to be an instructor at scout school. We had orgs, I won't name them, who sent. Orgs can send whoever they want to scout school. There were a lot of orgs. There were a lot of different types of people that they would send. So like a common thing was recently retired players who they're hiring as a scout. I'm going to send you and just like crash course on scouting for a week, and you're going to come back a little bit more prepared. Maybe not in the talent evaluation portion of scouting, but in the relationship building, how to set up an area, those types of things that like we taught at scout school outside of just the evaluation piece. There were orgs that sent current scouts who it was just like, you maybe need a refresher.
Sure.
You haven't been great. And like every org now for sure, back then kind of, has a way of like evaluating their own scouts. And if a scout fell below a certain metric or critique or whatever, they would send them to scout school. And then there were orgs who would send their quants, their nerds.
Sure.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah.
Because the first day you're out there, and this is Arizona Fall League, you just like the sun baking down on you. These nerds are fish out of water so fast. But like they're going to learn how to communicate with the coaches.
Yeah.
And learn how to communicate with the players.
Yeah.
And the scouting staff, because it's important to be able to speak the same language.
Yeah.
And like if I'm telling you, if I'm asking you, what do you want as a coach in the draft, and you're telling me, I want, pitchers with a lot of ride on their fastball or whatever. It's like, okay, I can literally filter out all pitchers who have under X spin rate on our model. And like we can make sure that we give you exactly what you're asking for, but if you don't ask for it in the same language, there's a lot that gets lost in there. And the orgs that sent their quants are probably, you would probably be able to guess them.
Sure.
And you can send as many people as you want. You just had to sponsor them, pay for the hotel, pay for the flight. So like,
Yeah,
there are definitely
no cap.
orgs that cap it themselves.
Yeah.
But like, that was so valuable, and like seeing those types of people there, and the reactions to those types of people, because you had like the recently retired guys who were like, look at these nerds over here, like, you know.
Yep.
And then you had the older scouts who are like, these guys are trying to take my job, and it's like they are so not. They don't want to be a scout.
Different gig, man.
Look at them. Look at the amount of sunscreen they just applied. Do you think that they want to be sitting on backfields all summer?
Yeah.
They're doing this to learn how to better communicate with you, to learn your language, to learn how to talk to you, because they find value in what you're saying.
Yeah.
And like somewhere along the line, publicly, because I don't think this is as drastic behind the scenes in baseball as it is like publicly on broadcasts and like on social media and whatever, with like, you know, there's a reason those guys aren't hired by teams.
Well, right. And
If they were any good at it, if they had valuable advice to give out, they'd probably be working for teams by now, because we know that if there are people giving out valuable advice on social media, they generally are going to probably get picked up by a team or some organization very quickly.
yeah, I think that's the thing that I find very hilarious about like the social media landscape, the way that we talk about the game from people that are played it at a much higher level than I ever did, but they don't have a high level understanding of the game in 2024,
Right.
you know, and everything that entails, where there's this presumption, I think, by some people that that the men and women that run these teams, who have all the financial incentive in the world to be as competitive, to eke out every ounce of competitiveness that they can, that like they're not good at their jobs. That is a crazy, crazy thought to me. You mean to tell me that like the Guggenheim Group, right, that owns the Dodgers, real good at making money, like super good at it. You mean to tell me that they're wrong about the way that they like evaluate and quantify performance? How do those two ideas mesh? How do you amass the billions upon billions of dollars in assets that allow you to buy one of the most storied professional franchises in sports, but you're like dumb?
Oh, it happens all the time. All the time.
Like, well, how
People,
do you believe this is a thing that's happening?
sports, and honestly, I don't know if I believe this. I was going to say sports is inherently different than other industries, but I don't know if that's even true. I think that there's this. You could probably talk to people from other industries, and they would say that this is happening in their industry as well. But like, the game, you know, oh God, I'm gonna sound so old right now. But the game isn't played on paper,
You're right. You're
right? And like, companies aren't made on paper. You can forecast all you want, but like, if you don't have an environment and a culture that is going to make sure you get the best out of your employees or your athletes, you're not going to get the best out of your employees or your athletes. You see all the time, you know, I honestly think, and maybe you can cut this out of the podcast if I shouldn't be saying this, but like, I think Steve Cohn's a really good example, right? Took over the Mets and was like, I am going to put it on the table.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can figure it out.
Yep.
I'm going to put it on the table. I'm going to spend a lot of money. And it didn't work.
Yeah.
It majorly backfired. Okay. He readjusted a bit, leaned a little bit more into the player development side, the culture building side, the clubhouse. And like, now they're a team that someone who, you know, with a lot of money wants to go play for.
Yep.
And like, sure, because he's Steve Cohn, he could hand out a contract that size. But also, Juan Soto doesn't want to go there if Steve Cohn over the past 4 years doesn't learn some lessons and adjust based on what he learned from those lessons.
And adjust the organization.
And adjust the organization. And I think it's probably true in like, look, I'm sure any company who got bought by a VC or taken over by a VC would probably tell me similar things, that like it's all about efficiency and like probably cutting of manpower and, you know, trying to get more from less. But like, at the end of the day, how your employees feel and how badly they want to go and do the thing you're paying them to do matters at the end of the day more than anything else.
Yep.
sports maybe is the most visible representation of that.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell, like most companies, you can't publicly see their employees go out there and not care that much.
Yeah.
You very publicly see a team like the White Sox who have totally quit on their coach, on their front office, whatever. And, sorry to White Sox fans, but like that clearly happened this summer.
Yeah.
And like you see it way more publicly in sports, but I'm sure that specific problem persists everywhere of like guys come in and have really good ideas. And the idea isn't the problem. It's the execution of that idea because you need people to help you execute that idea.
Yes.
And if you don't, whether intentional or not, if you don't care so much about the people that are actually going to go out there and do the work, you're probably not going to get the results you want at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that shows up in sports more than anything else because that's public.
Yeah.
You don't get the results you want, and it's very public, and people lose jobs over it. And like, I have League Pass.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of basketball. The thing I love most about basketball right now, there's a lot of great players in the league. There's a lot of fun stuff
League's
happening.
In a great place.
Is the Thunder post-game interviews.
Yeah.
The Oklahoma City Thunder, like credit to, I'm going to butcher his last name, but Mark Daignault, or however you pronounce the last name, the head coach, that team only takes interviews together as a team.
They look so bought in.
So they look so happy. They look like they're having so much fun. And like they went from the lottery to the conference finals last year. They're probably the favorite to go again, if not win it this year or whatever. But like, they have talent, like no question. But they care so much about each other.
Yeah.
And like clearly there's an environment there where they are so happy, and all they care about is winning basketball games.
Yep.
The second you introduce other things that people have to care about, they care about winning games a little bit less. So like this was relatively public with like Juan Soto and maybe not loving the Yankees ownership. Yeah. That was like a pretty public thing that happened, and like maybe he was worrying about that. And it took a little bit away of worrying about winning baseball games.
Yeah.
Or doing his job of being the best hitter in baseball if he's going to get paid that much money.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to go and play as hard for the Yankees owners because he doesn't feel like they care about him.
Yep.
That's a real thing. Yep. It happens in every industry, and like you could have the best ideas in the world. And I don't think that's true of the Steinbrenners, but maybe it is. They have the best idea. They went to Juan Soto and said, "Here is our plan for the future." And out of all the pitches, it was clearly the best plan, and they had the best ideas. If like the actual culture doesn't get the most out of people,
yep,
the idea itself doesn't matter at all.
It's immaterial.
At all. And I think that's a lesson as a humanity as a whole is struggling to like really understand. Because like a lot of stuff today is about efficiency and profits and that kind of stuff, and like all across the board you're seeing people taken advantage of at a lower level. And like I think that's very true of sports, and like you can have the richest guy in the world buy a team, and he can have the best ideas and know exactly how to run a team, and if he can't communicate that and get buy-in from the athletes that actually go out and play, his ideas don't matter at all.
Yep. Look at Jerry Jones. Right?
You can go out and pay the best players in the world.
Yep.
If you don't have an idea of how that's going to work, and on the flip side, you can be the Tampa Bay Rays.
I was just going to say.
You can be the Detroit Lions and say, like, we are going to build the culture first.
Yeah.
And we're really going to lean into the system and treat the people who are going out there and doing our work really, really well so that more people want to come and are willing to make sacrifices, whether it's like moving to a different location, taking a little less money, not going somewhere, not like jumping at the first opportunity, whatever that is. Like that's a real thing that like, hey, we're going to make this the most fun place to work. And like, it's going to come with winning games.
Yeah.
We might have to wait a couple years to really get the buy-in from the people here.
Yep.
But like, that's a real thing. And you see organizations do it all the time. People wonder why the Rays do so well with no payroll.
Yeah.
It's because like those players understand the plan. They know why they're there. They know what it means, and it's a good, conducive environment to get the most out of each other. And like, you can set that environment up in different ways, right? Like, you could be the Oakland A's, and like every year, no matter how bad they are, the A's always have one guy who came out of absolutely nowhere and is like really, really good. And like, look, I'm not saying that's because the A's have the best player development or like they're the most fun place to work, because that's clearly not true. But like, they've been more willing to give people opportunities to fail at large scale than other teams do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, we're maybe not going to compete this year. You're a relatively cheap contract. I'll give you 400. Like, you had a huge pedigree and have never been able to put it together at the major league level with 200 at bats a season. I'll give you 400 at bats and see if you can figure out how to work this way out.
Yeah.
Right? And like, that doesn't mean it's the most fun environment to go to work in for that player, but like, that player is extremely motivated to play his heart out for that team because, hey man, I believe in you.
Yeah.
Like, I am going to give you the at-bats or the innings or whatever it is that like all these other teams haven't. And sure, maybe it's because I'm going to run a low payroll, but like, every year you see it, like somebody comes out of the A's and is like, wow, didn't expect that guy to be really good. And yeah, the belief piece, even if the A's don't really believe it.
Yeah.
Like, the player does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just that the best idea isn't always going to win. You know, like if you don't have the structure and culture to execute, then it's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
You know,
and
kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, to your point of like why like you don't believe that the Guggenheim people, like, that's because the Guggenheim people went out and hired a bunch of people at the top of the organization that are really good at building and setting a culture.
Yes. Yep.
You can have a lot of money and do the exact opposite of that.
Yep.
And there are a lot of examples of that.
Yeah. No, that's the hilarious thing about the presumption that, you know, the people, the men and women that are running these teams and these orgs aren't good or don't have the right knowledge to kind of evaluate stuff. It's just like the ones that do it right, I would offer the Guggenheim Group as one of them. They don't need, you know, Mark Walters is the president of the Dodgers Group, I think. That guy doesn't need to be a baseball guy.
No.
He doesn't need to. He needs to equip his baseball staff with tools, culture, to your point, engagement in the activity, like motivation to want to go do the thing at the highest level. And if you don't think that they're using analytics to kind of inform how that stuff is going over time, then like you're fooling yourself. And that's the, you know, to your point about like,
that's why every year there are conversations. Well, not this year because they won it, but like, should Dave Roberts get fired? Should Dave Roberts?
Oh boy, the last.
Have the Dodgers ever even like actually considered that? Probably not.
Probably not.
Because he does get the most out of those players.
Yeah.
There are some years where like, yeah, man, they lost the World Series this year, or they lost in the NLCS, or like they had some injuries and they struggled in the playoffs.
Yep.
But like, in the playoffs is the key word to every one of the seasons that he's coached them.
Correct. And in some of those decisions, you know, the reality is that like they are dice rolls. Like they just are. Right. And I think if you're a smart person, you understand that, you know, you can't be risk averse and also be committed to winning. You have to embrace some of these risks.
Well,
like
I got home just in time yesterday after practice to watch the wild Bills Lions kind of end of that game. 12 minutes left in the game, down 10, Dan Campbell onside kicks. That is objectively an incredibly stupid decision.
Yep.
Like, incredibly stupid decision.
Yep.
He even admitted as much. Like, that one didn't work out.
Yeah.
We always knew this was going to come back down to the Chicago Bears. But, like, we've done a lot of dumb things. The next day, you don't hear the full-throated endorsement from the players of, like, look, man, it didn't work out.
Yep.
Like, I understand why you did it. I'm with him. It just didn't work out. No, if that was what you heard from the Bears players, the head coach would probably still be the head coach of that team.
Correct.
The Lions players, knowing that their head coach may have lost them a huge game that has like home field for the playoff ramifications. I have not heard a single thing from anybody in that. They love playing there. And that's, you know, we talked about Mike Tomlin last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. But like, man, go pick any of the people you think are the best coach of all time. Tomlin, Greg Pop. Well, okay, maybe remove Belichick from the situation.
That's a dicey one.
That's a dicey one. But like Tomlin, Popovich, Steve Kerr, Phil Jackson, these guys aren't. You don't remember like, oh my God, Steve, like Phil Jackson, the X's and O's that he was able to do. Yeah. Do you remember Phil Jackson's nickname?
He was the Zen Master.
The Zen Master.
Yeah.
Definitely tactical, right? Has nothing to do with how he got the most out of his players by keeping them relaxed and calm and letting them be themselves.
Yep.
Like success leaves clues. There are a lot of really good coaches that people think of as like on the Mount Rushmore of coaches. And those guys are not tactical geniuses.
Right.
Belichick is different, right? Like Belichick is maybe one of the very few on the other side who seemingly
terrible people skills
does get the most out of his players, but uses fear to do so.
Yeah.
Which it is what it is. But like, I grew up in the 90s in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like that was what coaching was to me.
It's leadership.
It's leadership. It was the Zen Master, right?
Yeah.
What were the Bulls famous for? Do you remember like the tactical thing the Bulls were famous for?
Oh, triangle offense.
Triangle offense.
Yeah.
Who created the triangle offense? Was it Phil Jackson?
No, it was not. It was, this is going to kill me because I know the guy's name. I can picture
Okay.
him.
He was born to be a character in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Tex Winter.
Tex Winters, baby. Yes.
Tex Winter.
Right. That's right.
Nobody talks about him.
Yeah.
Because the offense was great. It was revolutionary. Wouldn't have mattered because the offense was in place for years, and they kept getting their butts beat by the Pistons.
Right.
Until Phil Jackson came in and got Michael Jordan to buy into the team thing.
Yep.
And, that's coaching. That's leadership, right? Like, it's not necessarily about the best idea.
No, it's getting that guy to pass the ball to Steve Kerr when he's open.
And John Paxson before him.
Yes.
That's...
People sleep on Paxson.
People sleep on Paxson. Well, not Bulls fans, because he actually... Not a bad GM.
Yeah, that's right.
History looks on him well after the current regime. Just Chicago sports right now, all-time low for me. It's
a tough scene, dude.
I'm in rough shape. I'm in incredibly rough shape. But
a
guy that I feel like the industry has turned on him a little bit. I will always have a ton of love in my heart for Joe Madden.
Man.
I spent time with him in Tampa.
Yeah.
Wonderful human being. Had no reason to give me any time and did.
Yeah.
Wonderful human being. And then I, was born and raised a Giant Cubs fan. So then he goes there and wins it. And is it because he does weird things that he wins? No, it's because the players love being in that dugout.
Yeah.
And the stuff that he does, the weird tactical decisions that he does, a lot of times when you hear the players talk about it, the players think it's really goofy, but it always comes with, but he trusts us to execute it.
Yeah.
It's the belief that he has in them, the trust that he, that's why he does the weird stuff. It's I trust you guys to execute this, and we need to just, switch things up a little bit.
Yep.
The vibe's a little tight. I'm going to loosen up the vibe, and I trust you guys to execute what I'm asking here. That is so much more important. How you communicate, how you express your ideas. And Sarah's just had an athletic article about it.
Yeah.
That I had a couple of people reach out to me because I think Bodie was quoted in it, Driveline's in it, about the next market inefficiency in baseball, because analytics isn't really a market inefficiency anymore.
No, everybody's...
being communication, compassion, the ability to coach. And it's extremely true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you said, right? The game isn't played on paper.
And I hate being... I'm not old enough to say that, goddammit.
No, but I think that's the weird place that we find ourselves, right? Is that there's this thought that by taking this approach that quantifies any aspects of performance and development, that by doing so, we're kind of inherently shifting that way, and it's we're kind of ignoring the game. There's this thought by a legion of ex-players who are old, and they're about as old as I am, that think that when we talk about things like exit velocity, launch angle, attack angle, spin axis, that by doing so, we're inherently doing that in a way that acts as if the game is played on paper, that we're trying to push it that way. And it's no, man, we are trying to understand performance because the game that isn't played on paper is so critical. And a lot of times it is played on the margins. right?
100%.
Like the leverage is on the margins.
Right.
It's finding out how do you turn pennies into nickels, nickels into dimes, dimes into quarters in terms of assets that you either trade away or that you weaponize within a system to get the most performance out of those guys before they get the big 765 Juan Soto contract.
Yeah.
You know?
It's interesting because it leads me back. I was listening to a podcast with Nate Silver, now of election fame.
Yes. Formerly.
A long time ago.
Do people even remember that he used to do like brackets and stuff?
He created Pacoda.
Yeah.
He was the creator of Pacoda for baseball. He worked for Baseball Prospectus. When I was 14 years old, I had him on a class project board and couldn't find a picture of him anywhere online to put next to Bill James.
Sure.
So I emailed him, and he responded with a really uncomfortable selfie sitting at his computer.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and like...
Why is that not your Slack profile
It should
picture?
be. It should be. And like... has changed a lot since then.
Sure.
Is a very different guy. But like, he was on this podcast after post-election talking about the fact that like, you know, people looked at 538 and were like, oh, it's a 51% chance or whatever of whoever winning. Oh, that person's going to win.
Yeah.
It's a 51% chance.
Yeah.
You actually have to like play the election out.
Yep.
But like the reality is that like it could 51, and it wasn't even, I don't think, a full 51. That could flip really quickly. And, like, that's the same thing is true in baseball. And, like, I'm not sure all quants fully understand that, right? Like, I have friends who are quants in baseball who I've argued with about how much does it, like, the environment, the culture, the personality matter in terms of, like, the analytics piece. And, like, in a lot of those guys' heads, you can't quantify that, so like you just can't include it.
Yeah.
So like we build the team on paper, and then it is what it is. It's like you're never going to get the most out of that team if that's the way you feel about it. And like you can separate those two very easily. But I think a lot of people really see the forecasted baseball stats or whatever it is, and they're like, "Well, that's wrong," because it's not exactly accurate. And it's like, no, this is a prediction.
Yes.
This is predicting what kind of value this person's going to bring in the future based on past performance or whatever it is. But people see that and they take it as like, oh, this is 100% what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then that's where the extra pressure comes down on these athletes. Where like, oh, well, I was projected to do this and now I'm doing this and now fans are booing me and whatever it is. And like, yeah, man, they're humans. Yeah. And like to pretend that how the crowd interacts with you, you slumping your performance, whatever it is, to pretend that like doesn't or shouldn't impact you because you're an athlete is crazy.
And on the other hand, I think a lot of times at the individual player level, you know, the way that we think about how to provide that type of context to athletes is all about empowering them to go out and compete and not think about that stuff.
Right.
You know, it's like, I mean, Danny and I had another really interesting conversation this weekend because I obviously introduced him to Paul, my umpire from back in the day. And I was like, hey, like, this is my son, you know, and he's like, what do you play baseball? And yeah, what do you do? I pitch. Like, what do you mean you pitch? You pitch, you play short, you catch, you play basically anywhere. Like, what are we talking about? And we talked about it later. And he was just being shy. But he also was like, well, Dad, I've thrown like 88.5, so like pitching is my best tool right now. So like that's the thing. But I'm like, so he's giving me this logic. He's like, and I know I'm not going to be, every pitch isn't going to be, 89, 90 or whatever. And I'll be sitting, mid-eights, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm glad, on the one hand, I'm glad that he understands that aspect of it. That like, he understands the concept of raise the floor by raising the ceiling definitively. Like he gets that. And I think because of that, it gives him perspective positively in terms of pitching about how his stuff plays. I don't think right now he has the same understanding on the hitting side, which is curious to me because it's like, I don't know if that's just because he's like, well, I know that there are a couple kids in the gym, more than a couple of kids in the gym that are his age that maybe hit the ball a little bit harder than he does. But it's like, that doesn't, it's interesting to me that as a 15-year-old child that he kind of understands that context on one side And then on the other side, maybe not as much. But that in and of itself.
Well, we talk about abstract thinking a ton, right?
100%.
I throw a ball, radar gun tells me good or bad.
Right.
I hit a ball, Hitchrack's exit velocity tells me top eighth or not top eighth.
Yes.
What it doesn't tell me is, dog, if there was a runner on second there, you just scored him.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me that, like, the kid who's, like, been here the longest is still needs to hear that from us.
Yeah.
You know, and if that's true, to bring this all the way back around, that to me is why, like, I did this podcast with Travis Rogers. It's the Parenting Athletic Kids podcast. If you don't get enough of listening to, you know, me blather on this podcast, I've got a couple other episodes for you because I got a couple podcast appearances coming out. But point being that, like, he asked me at one point on the show, he was like, you know, talk to me about things that parents can use to help coach their kids in a positive fashion that's not about skill development. And I kind of had to say, I was like, I think those two things are intertwined. Because to me, training with data and being able to leverage that data to provide context about development to a kid is inherently providing positive context. It's you can't separate those two things. So yeah, I can say that, like, you know, things like understanding cognitive development, things like understanding emotional regulation, things about understanding you know, the way that you kind of build a kid up through the failure that's implicit in our game, that to me is inherently also about training. Because the game isn't played on paper. We're going to go through these development phases. You're going to start with performance level X. You are going to work really hard. We're going to raise that to performance level Y. And then when you get to go play the game, just go play. Mm-hmm. Right? Because to your point, if that isn't a top eighth batted ball event, but it does score that runner on second, you're going to be playing a game. You're going to be on a field where none of that information is going to be present. And in a training environment, you might feel bad. In the competition environment, devoid of that stuff, if you're doing it well, you should feel good. And
Correct.
you shouldn't be standing on second base going, well, you know, I think I only hit that like 87 instead of 94.
Right.
Like, no one cares, including you.
No, the fun part, and we've talked about this in the pod, although it's been a while, is like when they come back to the dugout and then they're arguing about how hard they think they hit it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's where analytics are super fun. Is like, oh, that was 90. No, it was not 90. Yeah. It was like 82, but it felt really good, and like you did the job. So in your head, you just hit a ball 90. Great.
Who
That's
cares?
right. That's a win. We've been doing this for a while. I don't know that we're ever going to really get kids without fully developed brains to hit in a cage and be able to, and like there's going to be outliers here for sure, but like be able to contextualize the field in that example, right? So we have to be intentional about doing it for them.
Yes.
So like, I mean, yesterday was a good example. We're playing a hit tracks game, 88 mile an hour line drive, zero doubt. This ball just turned the center fielder. Mm-hmm. You're screwed. This is at least a triple.
Yeah.
Hit track says center fielder caught it.
Sure.
Batter gets really mad. I was like, he's like, this is bullshit. Like this, sorry for swearing on the pod. This wouldn't happen. Like this is not real life. And I was like, yeah, man, I've never seen you hit a hard line drive right at somebody.
Yeah.
And like the immediate like freeze and like, oh yeah, I definitely have done that. Uh-huh. But like the hit track just feels different.
Sure.
Right? Like it feels, you're not out there. There's not other people. But like when you set up the games in that way, sure, we had one kid hit a home run yesterday, turn around and be like, 89, that wasn't that cool. Then hit a double that didn't drive anybody in, that was 94.8, and be like, that was cool. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
We had one kid hit, with runners on second and third and 2 outs, 68.5 mile an hour blooper to right field, drops, scores both runs. In real life, that actually might happen.
Yes.
Right? And like that moment, they kind of felt, they're all jumping up and down, they're going crazy. And that was the closest I've seen it to like a game, but it's only because we have to add that extra context of like, No, sometimes you can miss-hit a ball and it works out in your favor, and sometimes you barrel one and it doesn't work out in your favor.
Yeah.
The game is very random.
Yeah.
When we just play it on hit tracks or play it on paper, it turns it from this random gray world to a very abstract black and white world, which we know that kids already struggle with.
Yep. And honestly, I think it's largely fine. You know, like there's somebody on social media who's going crazy the other day about, had this video of Luis Arias, and his tee hitting, where like, he takes a swing and like he's really artificially like forcing his head to stay right where the ball was on the tee, and it's like, look, he's not looking back at the hit tracks to check his numbers.
No, he did. It just wasn't that clip wasn't posted on social media.
Yeah,
there's zero chance that a professional baseball player doesn't hit with some sort of technology.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but like it's such just like this very false equivalence that like, well, this guy who's
it's the outlier equivalence.
Yes,
he's an outlier. My kid can do that.
Exactly, he's better than most human beings on the planet right now in his competition environment against those type of competitors. And if he takes this swing without leveraging any technology and it's that guy that's doing it, then, well, I'm telling you that your 11-year-old should also exist in this age of ignorance, right? Because, well, that's how you're going to, like, that's literally the thing that you're trying to kind of draw a correlation to. And that's just complete, I mean, you dropped one off, swear word alert, that's complete horseshit, right? That's just not how that works. Yeah. There's no way that you can just go, well, hitters are going to be better if you strip information away from them. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah. And look, man, coaching takes feel. Mm-hmm. There are moments where you have to strip the data away from someone.
Yes.
There are moments where you got to tell a kid, you know what, hit lefty.
Hey, look, I may have a budding switch hitter because for no reason other than hitting right-handed was getting frustrated. And the frustration was boiling into a level that starts to border on non-competitiveness, and he needed a pressure release.
Well, you asked me, why did you let him hit lefty? And I said, because he told me he likes hitting lefty, and I hadn't heard him saying he likes hitting in like a month and a half, so I just let him hit lefty. Have some fun.
And after that session, go into hit tracks, look at his top 8th averages from one to the next to the next to the next.
I know.
And again, these are...
But that's feel. Like, you have to look at a kid and say, okay, I got to take you out of this right now.
Right.
Like, I have to remove you from this environment, and we have to massively change something. And, like, I would venture to guess most people, especially people who are using as much data as we do try to limit one-on-one interaction as much as possible because it's not efficient.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think just the larger point, though, is that, like, training with data and weaponizing analytics and development doesn't preclude you from feel.
No.
Right? That's just... The person that is selling you that story is a moron. Don't listen to them.
Right. And, I mean, they're as bad as the people who are refusing to use any data and using T's.
Yes.
The people that use a ton of data and have no feel with it.
Yes.
Like, you're just never going to teach a kid to understand that.
Yep.
And, like, the younger the kid is, the less they care about the mechanics or whatever analytics you're throwing at them. And, like, I would say that's, like, high schoolers. Most high schoolers don't really care.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know. I honestly was thinking about that myself, like, on the drive-in this morning. Like, I don't know. You know, maybe we have...
There's a lot of pro guys who don't care.
Right. So
just tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it.
If like communication and compassion and buy-in is like this big, if that's a leverage opportunity, right? Because we've already struck all the gold that we could possibly find out of analytics. If that's true, then we have to think about the simplicity with which we communicate that type of stuff. And if we need to just go through a period of auditing where it's just like, let's be as ruthlessly efficient as possible about communicating simple things with 1,000% clarity, and I'm thinking about like some of our mocap reports and stuff like that. Like, maybe we need to, I don't know, for the kids, like try to get even simpler. And not to say that we can't have all that information on the back end with our coaches to weaponize, but
It's very dependent on the person.
yeah.
Some people, you go in there and try to give them a very simple athlete meeting, they're going to feel like you don't care enough about their athlete.
Sure.
Whether it's the athletes themselves or the athlete's parents, like, wow, you didn't go over anything there.
Yeah.
Some people are going to sit there with glazed eyes as you go through all the information, like that I just sat there as you threw large words at me for 20 minutes, and like I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
You don't have to meet with me. Like you can do this and like you're fine.
Yeah.
The coaching is like understanding what each athlete needs.
Man.
And how to give each athlete what they need in the way that they need it.
And if that's all true, then all this comes back to is just like the importance of good coaches.
And just caring about the athlete you're coaching.
Yep.
Like if you care about the athlete you're coaching, do you understand how many mistakes you can get away with?
Yeah.
Whether it's like poor training, poor communication on something, losing games, whatever it is, poor development. If you care about that person and they know that, you're going to be able to get away with a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. I don't have anything else. I think that's a good finisher right there. Well, look, this might be the most topically scattered podcast we've ever done. This is episode number 81, I believe. So you can get your money's back if you like it, but you didn't pay for this. No, I think this is a good one to cut it loose.
And if you did pay for this, let us know.
Yeah,
you shouldn't be paying for it.
Yeah, please don't do that. Let us know. Axbat.com, code D as in dog, L as in leg, 20. Kept it simple, right? Get you 20% off at axbat.com. Go to drivelinebaseball.com or call our support line at 425-523-4030 to get access to the wonderful suite of tools and training equipment that we have for you. You can get information on things like the Driveline Academy Power Hour, which is a free hitting session to start. Get information on things like Driveline Academy Flex, where you can train with us. You get information on things like our Snapshot, which is a 90-minute biomechanic assessment for kids, where you can apply we can give to you this type of context about how your kid performs and what they need to work on next, because weirdly, if you have that information, you can actually use it to try to get better. That's all I got. He is Jeremy. I am Devin. We are Down by Law. Rest in peace, my Aunt Dawn and my Uncle Bob. I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.